Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Business Insights Festival. This is the second of two sessions that we've got running today. Earlier on, we had a really very insightful question storming session, which was all about the subject of how can we use placemaking to create an inclusive society. Very fascinating discussion, facilitated by Sandra Beer, who I will introduce properly in a moment, but our US partners, Personal Cities, have been involved in this whole game with us since the very start. And we're thrilled to be using this question storming and solution storming process that they've been preparing today as we look at this. Business Insights running over today and tomorrow. Some great stuff lined up for tomorrow. This should be a really interesting session. Welcome to those of you watching on live stream. We've got a great panel who, as I said a moment ago, have spent the last an hour or so a bit earlier just considering the subject anyway, and got some wonderful input to give us. So Sandra, I'll let you introduce yourself. Over to you to facilitate from here.
Thank you, Pete, and welcome to everyone from around the world listening to this session. I sort of wish you'd been at the first one as well. It's a question storming session where you were only allowed to ask questions about a very difficult question. How can placemaking help us set a path toward a more inclusive recovery? I'm the CEO of Personal Cities, so I work with cities for a living and try to help them improve their community identity, their sense of place, their brand image, if you will. So it's very important that we all, this important group today, sort of help us understand what are the next steps, what are solutions that we might recommend to anyone listening about using placemaking in the most positive way. Before we get started, we won't go backwards to question storming. So this session is really about some perhaps pragmatic sort of insights, ideas that each of these panelists have about placemaking and its value. But I'd like each of the panelists to very quickly introduce yourself, just give a very quick introduction of your name, your place, and your work, so that our audience knows the power of this group. Go ahead. We'll start with Ian Mean.
Oh, hi, I'm Ian Mean. I'm in Gloucester, and I'm Director of Business West here and a member of G1st LEP. I'm a former editor of regional newspapers and have lots of connections with health service.
Great. Janina?
Hello everyone, I'm Janina Neumann. I'm based in Tewkesbury in the UK. I have a bilingual design company called Janina Neumann Design, helping clients create a social impact in the UK and abroad.
Carlos?
Hi, I'm Carlos Trubino. I'm based in Pittsburgh in the US. I'm CEO of a branding company called The Machine. I do a lot of work with city branding projects.
Ian Porter?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ian Porter. I'm a governor at Western College in the UK. We are the 5th largest college in the UK. I work within business growth, supporting our team there and creating brighter futures for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Nadine?
Hello, my name is Nadine Bitar. I'm calling in from the United Arab Emirates, and my real work is around consulting with local authorities in the region on how we can plan cities for a better future.
Thank you. Ethan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan Kent. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I lead something called Placemaking X, which grew out of Project for Public Spaces. Been building a placemaking field movement for last couple decades, now focused on networking it to be more bottom up from conversations like this, from question stormings and solution storming events globally.
Great. Manor. Oh, Manor, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I do apologize.
Yes.
Second
No
time
worries.
round, always things happen twice. Mana Singh, South Gloss Council, Economic Development Team, work as the Senior Economic Development Officer, working within business support. I do apologize, I have to leave a little bit early today, so I'll switch off when I can. But thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I'll call on you first in that regard. Steve Gardner-Collins.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Gardner-Collins. I'm from Gloucestershire here in the UK, and I am Director of Visit Gloucestershire, our destination management organisation, and I am also Sales Director of a hotel group here in the Cotswolds and the wider Gloucestershire area. Yeah, that's me.
Great. And Louise, our host, can you make a quick introduction?
Hello.
There she is.
There I am. Hi everybody, my name is Louise Taylor and my business is Tailor Made Business Services. I help local businesses with their office management and support, and I'm here just to host along with Pete. Welcome all. Thank you, Sandra.
Absolutely, absolutely. So here's what we want to do for the next time of this session is to explore actual ideas, insights, solutions, if you will, to what cities could do, what organizations can do, what colleges and universities can do. What can people do to come together, maybe in new coalitions? Maybe there are new ways of gathering and collecting volunteer help or professional help. What are the solutions that you have in mind that might actually help us use placemaking toward an inclusive recovery? Just as a very brief recap, in our question storming session earlier today, we identified several important questions around that question, having to do with the influence of social media, the way to empower and engage the youth in each of our cities and countries, the idea of technology and using technology or abusing technology, perhaps for the wrong purpose, to really create a sense of place, a sense of identity. The other, we also talked about the impact on mental health and emotional health from the pandemic, from social and racial injustices, from climate change. I mean, there's so many crises that are converging on us today. So what is it that we need to do urgently? What do we need to act on, not just talk about, regarding placemaking? Manor, do you want to kick off with some ideas that you have perhaps to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, I think this is certainly one of the most difficult things to achieve in terms of bringing people together, and certainly under the pandemic, we have a lot more challenges at this moment in time. I always come with the viewpoint that in terms of whether it's placemaking, whether it's project delivery, whether it's frontline services, certainly the aim from a council perspective is partnership work, is coming together, building those rapport, building that connectivity with key stakeholders and individuals who potentially not only are the decision makers, but who can also influence on how you develop a policy, develop a service. And as I said, at this moment in time, we've got a lot more challenges to that kind of stifles these kind of opportunities. Solution wise, very difficult at this moment in time in terms of what that solution looks like. I'm thinking as we speak.
Let me interrupt you. I agree, solution wise is a challenge, but what's one step you could take? Let's try to get really pragmatic here. What's one thing, one risk to take, one change to make that you might advocate? Anything you can talk about, or is it too political?
Well, yeah, that's the constraints as well that we have. People like meeting people, people like talking to people, being open and frank and developing that trust and that rapport with individuals. I think that's the most important thing. And if you come across with empathy, with sensitivity, with understanding, that covers most of, the challenges that you face.
Okay. So what we're looking for in this session is exactly what you're talking about, and to get as granular as you can. I go to all these meetings and people say blah, 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 and then, give me some advice. Give me a recommendation. Tell me what to do. Not everybody wants that, but I'm just saying for the purpose of this conversation, step outside of your box. Luke Townsend, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, but please do, and then give me your insights, your outside the box thinking.
Yeah, I was just on the other chat, and I saw you there briefly, Sandra. But yeah, I think from my side, I did introduce myself earlier, so I think everyone be familiar with who I am. But I would say what would be very interesting for me is to see how the cities own their airspace, and how that airspace around the city becomes the area of inclusivity. Creating more opportunities through easier, cheaper, more effective ways to communicate, to trade, to have conversations. And I really like the idea of airspace around a city becoming something that becomes a more integrated space for placemaking.
Wait a minute. Airspace? AIR?
Yes. Yeah, so basically what I'm talking about is the digital communications that flow around us all the time. When we walk from a store to a store, there's always something moving around us in the air. And I think cities can use that really as a nice inclusive space to make people feel more welcome, more encouraged to participate more, just by giving easy access to information. But I do like the idea of this airspace within a city being used to create an inclusive environment where it doesn't become something that is built for a particular group of people, as we're seeing a lot in the cities. People in France or in Paris, for example, find it difficult to live within the city because it's so expensive. Does that mean you're not Parisian? Can you not have a Parisian kind of access or lifestyle or culture, even though you don't necessarily have the affordability to live within that city? And I think that's what that kind of, when I refer to the airspace around the city, can extend that city, quite a bit and make that culture more pervasive through, outlying areas as well.
Oh, I love that idea. I plead ignorance. And I think Ethan and Nadine, you must already know about all that, but I love that word and I love the idea. I think, wow, let's go forward. Nadine, do you have some ideas about what we could do going forward?
I think there are so many ideas. I think the first one is making our cities more child-friendly. When a city is friendly to the children, it's suitable to everybody. And one of the main issues we have gone through COVID-19 is how we can make our city safe for children during COVID-19. And public space here plays a big role, especially public spaces that are within 5 minutes inside residential neighborhoods. And
what does child-friendly mean? I'm going to be interrupting you guys the whole time. What does child-friendly mean? Define that for me.
Well, UNESCO has a big document around, and Ethan is laughing. It's like a 200-page document on what is a child-friendly city.
Okay, good.
But let me say the main concept of a child-friendly city is it's playful, it's creative, it's accessible. So there is universal accessibility, but also it's accessible for children of multiple needs, because some children have learning difficulties, some of them have autism, some of them has Asperger's syndrome, so they have different needs. So making these public spaces that are, let me talk about pocket parks inside neighborhoods, for example, that have play spaces that cater to multiple levels of children, and to also children who have multiple needs. I think it's one of the things that could be a quick and lighter and cheaper intervention. The second focus for me is age-friendly cities, because that's another issue we are facing, that we take for granted what is aging means. Aging is becoming more creative. And in the 21st century, it's going to become also more innovative. For example, in UAE, our highest penetration of Facebook is for people above 50. Facebook is becoming for people above 50. And people above 70 are using Facebook to organize themselves, especially for heritage. So the Community Development Authority in Dubai have multiple programs on how you can make people more aware of spaces they can use in the city and how you can make these spaces more available for them, but also how you can organize their meetings. So are we going to have community groups use of these spaces more organized? Because
well, does that mean organization in an era of COVID? Does that mean organized meetings, Zoom conversations, socially distanced in-person meetings outside? What does that mean?
No, I'm talking about the transition. If we are going to transition to an inclusive world, that transition needs to be organized. And personally, because I'm consulting with local authorities all the time, it's the responsibility of the local authority to enact policies, put in place programs, think of strategies on how a city can become more age-friendly, linking the social groups to space, because place at the end of the day has a 3 dimension. The first dimension of place is the meaning and the perception and the fulfillment we get. We have also the physical aspects, accessibility, activity, diversity, design, even sustainability, especially environmental sustainability in terms of green spaces, and the social groups. Unless we link these 3, place cannot exist, and placemaking as a process. So this is the second social group I'm talking about in terms of inclusion. And the third inclusion for me is about youth. And why? Because also in the Arab world, 35% of our population is youth. We are actually one of the youngest regional demographics in the world. So we are facing a totally different issue from like Japan, who's, they have the aging issue. We have a youth issue. And to include youth within our programs is very important. Now, how do we do that? And this is where also Dubai has a very good experience of using innovation hubs and innovation spaces. And in that term, placemaking is not about the public space. We're talking here more about transformative placemaking for innovation districts. So how we can use placemaking as an innovation and transformation process to have an innovation ecosystem linking the university, the startups, the innovation hub, the venture capitalists, the angel investors, into a system that works together. And this is, Dubai has done it for the past 20 years. I was personally involved in one of these innovation districts. The third one comes from my recent experience in Saudi Arabia. And I'm talking here particularly about women. And we were working, I was in one of the local authorities in Saudi, and we had a request coming from a women group to build their own innovation hub. Because most of these women were mothers and they needed a totally different program. And so the program used a process of placemaking. We used a different type of process to make sure that the program of the Innovation Hub caters for mothers who want to take care of their children and at the same time work. And these are the groups I'm thinking of. Of course, you can have people with because also Victor Pineda, he's a thought leader on inclusive cities, and he has done a very good policy document with the Dubai School of Government on how we can make policies for inclusion. And it can start by one small thing. Right. If the local council just take or contact a community group that deals with people with determination. We don't call them disability, we call them people of determination in UAE, and just walk with them. Walk with them in their sidewalks and just register their experiences. Because what happened is you are actually seeing the city or the council from their own perception. And it can lead you to minimum changes to increase their mobility and accessibility. So these are
so much. I want to move on to the other panelists, but you have based on your experience and your part of the world, you have some very special challenges. So it's great to hear about them. And I think if anyone's listening from that part of the world, they should contact Nadine and get help with that. Ian Mean, I wonder if you could give us a little insight about where you think the insights are for placemaking in your part of the world.
Yeah, Sandra, 2 points. I've mentioned young people before.
Yes.
For 6.5 years, I was vice chairman of the Urban Regeneration Company in Gloucester, tasked with really by the government, it was a government company, to reform, rebuild some of Gloucester. What we soon found out is that we were all old people with ideas that actually weren't in touch with young people at all. So what we did, we actually recruited a board of young people, a shadow board. We took them to various places. I took them to Liverpool, for instance, to Newcastle, and they had absolutely great ideas. We weren't able to put all those into practice, but I think we make a big mistake if we ignore opinions of young people. I'm an honorary vice president of a college like Ian's, Gloucestershire College, deal with young people all the time. We underestimate their ideas. They're generally not taken into account. Number two, it's clear to me in Britain, people have got to move back into the cities. Cities will die, retail's all is dead already, and the only way you're going to revive this is have people living back in the city, particularly young people. You find this with university students. They bring life to the nighttime economy. We see this in Gloucester. How is that going to happen?
I need to interrupt you. Give me one suggestion, just one, about how you might make that happen.
Planning. The government are actually saying we're going to alter all the planning laws. They've got to really look at this carefully. It's going to cost a lot of money. That's the only way, in my view, you're going to have dramatic change.
So actually change the laws, change the regulations, the statutes, the way in which we're living in a city. Yeah.
Totally.
Great. Thank you so much. Carlos, what is your insight from our earlier discussion, and any suggestions about what to do?
Yeah, I think I have a couple of things I'd like to suggest. One is more general, the other one's more specific. But I think on the the subject of inclusion, and we talked about social media and mainstream media as well. We have amazing technology. We have self-flying helicopters putting out fires in California. We've got robots performing surgery better than humans. And we can't figure out, fake disinformation from actual facts. And this is a huge dividing, social fact right now. It's not so much, I'm sorry if I'm a little bit US centric here, but, just watching the news here, what's happening with what's happened recently in the US Capitol and Trump leaving office and all that. It's just the people that are supporting this kind of, what seems to be like a bit of a craziness, it's just a completely misinformed. They're not necessarily bad people or acting poorly. And I think in order to bring that discussion of inclusion and equity, there needs to be, we need to use technology and maybe artificial intelligence to better address and inform and educate the public, to bring it to a more, kind of neutral place, right? Right now, and it's not just in the US, it's happening in Spain, it's happening in South America. There's a lot of division in opinion, and a lot of it is because of misinformation. Yeah. So I think the use of technology to solve that would be a good thing to.
So how would we actually, what one thing might we do to start that change?
I think using artificial, and people are doing, social media are doing a little bit of this right now. It's just not as prolific as we'd like it to be, but just using artificial intelligence to identify fake news, for instance, to identify
using more
what is
of it. Yeah,
using more of it, and frankly polishing it up too, because it's not that accurate yet. Yeah.
Do you
So
have
that's more,
another specific idea?
yeah, more specific. I wanted to talk about something using a little bit of an example of what's happening in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has become a huge, a big technology hub. There's some great stuff coming out of here in terms of robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and a huge, great, tech ecosystem developed here. However, it's a very exclusive, I would say, environment. It's very, very non-inclusive, and that's a big issue. And you can see, particularly with the African American community, they're just nowhere to be found in the tech world. And there's a lot of people here that should be. And one of the initiatives that's beginning to work out, one of the problems that has been identified is that there's not enough youngsters, in the African American community that even think that technology is accessible to them. So one initiative that's happening here that's working well is they created these spaces, recreational areas, where they teach young, Black kids coding, and they essentially make them aware and attract them to the practice of coding and what it can do for them professionally, even whether they do or not go to college thereafter, because there's a lot of great jobs to be had, particularly in the tech community with the ability to code. So that's something that not just doing sports camps and whatnot, but they're actually doing public recreational spaces where they're teaching and encouraging and making African American kids believe and pursue that as an option, as a professional option.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's actually real world. I wanted to mention one thing. I'm going to call on Ethan Kent next, but I wanted to mention that there's an organization started 7 or 8 years ago in the United States called Metro Lab Network. It's a collaboration between cities and universities. So there's one in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, with the city of Pittsburgh, and they're figuring out what are the collaborations they can do together. What is the university researching on that might help the city? What does the city need that might be researched on by the university? So I think there's actual things that are being done when people say, I have this need and, oh, I can help. And that's where I think placemaking is also, really important. Ethan, can you talk a little bit about your insights and recommendations for placemaking, putting it to work?
So, well, first of all, I think, really good placemaking is inherently very pragmatic, and we're seeing that, all around the world. And, I think part of it's about amplifying and connecting and forming what's happening. We've long seen placemaking. A lot of the best placemaking is what we call lighter, quicker, cheaper. So short-term, low-cost improvements that often are done sort of somewhat more informally and iteratively. And there's you fail fast and that kind of thing. And we've been pushing for the temporary reclamation of streets and taking over parking spots, for decades now. And all of a sudden, not because of anything we did, it's happening. There are over 10. There's over 10,000 streeteries in New York that have been allowed to be permanent. But this is there's all kinds of ways vendors and street performers and other retail are being allowed to use sidewalks in ways that frankly benefit the place and the community. And it's not perfect, but it's an iterative approach that's getting figured out. That can inform more permanent designs if needed. Sometimes you don't need the more permanent designs. So it's unleashing, placemaking is about sort of facilitating, unleashing, informing, inspiring action, small scale action at a large scale, and that resourcefulness and sort of frugality as well. But I also want to, say that this is also about process. It's also about engagement and conversations like this. And, I feel very lucky to have gotten to be part of placemaking conversations in, over 1,000 communities around the world and building a network and a placemaking movement. But really what my passion is to allow other people to simply question what makes their places work, how they can be improved. And this process is such a model process that I think we need to help people have experience during and coming out of this crisis and the multiple crises we're in, to question how they can best work together to improve their public realm and what they can do to it. A couple sort of bigger ideas, just quickly. I wanted to mention about tourism, and the tourism industry has obviously been one of the most affected and it's been challenged. And there was, coming into this, there were big, questions about over tourism, especially in many European cities and elsewhere in the effect on tourism. But obviously, this is a rare opportunity to reinvent that industry. And we're actually working with a group called Fairbnb that's trying to disrupt Airbnb in a sense to invest back into the place, to engage communities, to host a more responsible, regenerative tourism. But bigger than that, just imagine if destination marketing companies moved from just selling their place to investing in it, to creating the product for and by the existing communities, building it with, if a small portion of their funding went to placemaking instead of just place marketing or branding, it might actually lead to better, more authentic place marketing and branding in a more effective one too, perhaps more organic approach to that. Then lastly, governance, again, so we talked about, process and the sort of the lighter, quicker, cheaper solutions and ways to fund this. But ultimately, this is about reinventing our participation, our institutions of democracy and management of the public realm that are needed. And we're seeing a big trajectory towards district, neighborhood scale management. Nadine talked about innovation districts. A lot of our research actually has been on that as well, how placemaking, focus on places can help drive innovation, a more inclusive innovation, a more inclusive economy shaping essentially. But I think it's true in all kinds of districts and neighborhoods as well. And people are talking about the 15-minute neighborhood as sort of a trendy topic. People are indeed living more locally, but how do we facilitate and capture this new place attachment, this new lovability to achieve livability more inclusively, more quickly. Yeah. And so there's a lot of innovation on place governance, place management, place-led financing as well. So just some of the topics that we have 15 regional networks around the world that are shaping the placemaking movement. And those are some of the cross-cutting topics that I think are really resonating. People are focusing on globally. We'll have different conferences on that. We'll love to, but this is a really useful way to inform and frame the conversation that we hope to build on. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just push back on one or explore one of your ideas. I mean, this idea that we can do things at neighborhood scale, I think is really critical, sort of a ground up kind of idea. But my work with cities is often where the city leaders and their C-level officials and, a group of the city staff sort of think they know what everybody needs. They think we know, the problems are public safety and crime, but oh no, wait a minute. When you look at the AI analysis, people really care about affordable housing. And so there's a disconnect, in my opinion, between city leaders thinking they know it all and have the means to control it, versus some kind of a new kind of coalition building where there's a whole ecosystem of players that get involved, everything from civic organizations to philanthropic to chambers of commerce and boards of trade to, all of these organizations that don't feel like they have a voice in a city. I mean, is there, in your opinion, Ethan, a way to do that? Or is that just sort of a BS pipe dream that's, oh yeah, we should include everyone? What do you think about that?
Well, I think inclusion is most practical and constructive at the place scale, at the human scale. Yeah. And we see sort of placemaking as, reinventing, challenging people to reconnect with the world, to take responsibility for the world beyond their home. And so simply how they, and again, in this crisis, people are reinventing that relationship. They're living on their porch more. They're connecting more locally. They're taking over their parking spots. They're they're caring, thinking about that scale. And at that scale, everyone is actually quite progressive, quite innovative when given when asked to participate in a sense, when given the questions, when given the opportunity to have a sort of smaller version of this conversation. So yeah, I do think we can reinvent it from that scale up. And then of course but the different models for place management, place governance, I work a lot with the Institute for Place Management based in the UK and the Center for Local Economic Strategies. They've thought about this stuff, much more than most parts of the world. There's lots of, really, interesting, useful discussions about, devolution, that are causing, we're throwing some stuff out that we shouldn't be, but we're also leading to, great innovation on other regards. So, obviously our general theory is that if any one sector or user group dominates the governance of anything, it's sort of limiting it. But at the same time, all these models of, whether it's innovation districts, business improvement districts, resident community, improvement districts, they all come from a certain sector. They're all being initiated by the sector with new energy. We want to celebrate that. But then we always want to figure out who's not included and how do we get other groups to participate and feel ownership over that as well. And so it's an ongoing, it's not about blocking who's leading it, but it's about realizing that whoever's leading it is likely blocking to a certain extent the other groups from participating. So how do we facilitate that diversification?
Well, I often say, who owns this? But of course, everybody has to step up, whoever steps up, I applaud.
We need more leadership on all skills, definitely.
That's right. There's a solution. Ian Porter, I don't think we've heard from you yet. And we haven't heard from Steve or Pete yet. So go ahead, Ian.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra. Very interesting hearing everybody's contributions so far. I suppose we're slightly different, really, because we've seen it as an opportunity rather than a problem, if you know where I'm coming from, because we've launched our placemaking just before Christmas in Weston. But what it has done is basically brought everybody together. We talk about, councils, we talk about our leaders. I've been on a council, I've been a mayor of the town, I've been a chairman of North Somerset Council, I'm a governor at the college. But what it has done is brought a fantastic group of people together now that actually want to work together. But a lot of it's been business led as well, which is fantastic, because business is the future of driving, us through this, pandemic to come out the other side. But not only business, but fantastic volunteers, because all of a sudden people want to help, but they don't know how to help. So basically, by having a pandemic, what it's done is brought volunteers out of the woodwork, shall we say. And now what we've done is created a group of people that we're going to take to the next level, because when we are moving forward out of this pandemic, what we will do is use those volunteers in different areas. So we've got a platform already in place to utilize our future needs around volunteers. I suppose we also at the college didn't sit back. We went over virtual to digital technology within 7 days, serving our 30,000 students that we deal with. We've opened in the last few weeks a place called Space Bar in our shopping mall in Weston Supermare, and that is a digital technology place for our Institute of Technology students to help support and build new websites, upgrade websites, and develop social media sort of stuff for our small businesses who haven't got the money or are finding it desperately hard at the moment to move forward. So it is a free contribution from the college in supporting our businesses, our local community, and all of our volunteers groups that are in the town. I suppose the other thing I really want to say is along this road really about, what are we going to do? Well, what we have done, we've created lots of different courses on the needs of what the community has asked for. And that is around like the mental health side of things, about creating mental health first aid courses for people to register, to recognize, understand, and look out for how to manage people that are struggling. And so that's all been developed by our teams at the college and available online for people to download and work towards. There is also, should we say, like a blended sort of future, I think, has come from our business needs within the town, because a lot of our people now who live in our area commute to big cities for for their work. And what a lot of people have told us, they don't want to go back to the big cities again. What they want to do is stay local or stay at home and have a blended approach. So I think in the future, what we will have is basically either a 60-40 or 50-50 split of people actually working from home, working from our town centres, because our town centre at the moment, like every other centre in the UK and possibly other places around the world, shops are closing left, right and centre. They're not going to reopen. So what do we do with these empty spaces? So rightly, we need to bring people back to live in the towns, but what we can create is a centre of excellence for people in the placemaking in these shopping malls and all that, as we've done with the Space Bar, to help and support our people, have market stalls in there supporting our local community and small businesses to sell their produce within the malls. So that side of it, a business hub in a shopping centre is something that we're creating at the moment.
Great.
Which is something that everybody wants to see. We've all got areas of deprivation. Don't matter where we live in the world. There is deprivation in every town, city, country. We've got it in Weston, but it doesn't stop giving people opportunities. And that is like, getting our youngsters who basically haven't got, or told that they would never go to university, given the university or our university centre in the town, given the option to go to university and learn these skills, even giving them laptops that they can book out and put back every day if they can't afford it. They're recharged every day and they can download, take them out in the morning, put them back at night.
Right.
And they can create their own futures and still get their degrees at the same time. We also launched the technology for the West of England, which is headed up by Western College, which is working with Gloucester College, working with Yeovil College, Bath College, UE in Bristol, is looking at new technologies for the aerospace industry. We work with aerospace, the MOD, Ministry of Defence. We work with Rolls-Royce, GKN, companies like that on engineering, on digital technology. And what we're doing, we're actually holding an event in July in Weston-super-Mare, plans, books, and I'm going to go ahead about looking at the carbon footprint, because people talk about the carbon footprint, but they've done very little about it. They plant a few trees, chuck a few seeds down, but pick up a bit of plastic. But actually delivering technology is going to be the future of what Carlos was saying earlier on. And the thing is that we're having autonomous vehicles around the town, so in the town, so that basically people can see, that we can create a digital future in Weston. And I will come in there, Sandra, in a minute.
No, I think you can keep talking for another 20 minutes, but we're going to cut you off. It sounds like you have some very pragmatic, practical things going on. So I applaud you, and we should investigate more of that. I have to say, I work with an organization called the Disaster Recovery Journal, and that one of their sessions coming up, I can't recall, sometime in March, is how do you handle civil unrest? So this is a particularly critical issue for the United States right now because of what just happened, the attack on our Capitol. But the other issue is, how do we handle the next pandemic? There will be another, right? And so I think there's a new awareness. Let's stop talking and ignoring some of these imminent consequences, and let's start planning for it. So I think we're all out there sort of thinking differently. I feel it. I sense a sense of urgency and a sense of we've got to change our ways. Steve Gardner, we hadn't heard from you yet. Very briefly, what do you think?
I'm coming from a point of doing this as a job, but I'm writing a tourism strategy. some of the things I've been noting as people have been talking, who's involved in this process is absolutely key. I've been very politically influenced by some people around me over the last couple of months, and I'm beginning to really realise that as the landscape of politics changes, the strategy that I'm writing for the next 3 to 5 years can't represent now. It needs to really focus on the future. I've really taken on the points about the younger generation. You know, as a 30-something-year-old, I consider myself to be young still. I have a very loud voice, and I really do feel that generationally we aren't heard. Made some really good notes about the age groups that's been mentioned today, 14 to 17, 18 to 24, and yeah, up to about 24. You don't hit that maturity level now because you're not able to buy your own home or do anything really financially until you're a bit older. So you kind of live in that parental world, but we have an opportunity to really engage with people who are of that younger demographic. I think the world of tourism is focused on in social media, the Facebookers, and as I think Nadine said, the 50+ market is a focus in that remit, but we've not evolved yet into this kind of airspace, as Luke mentioned at the beginning, of how we create an inclusive model that talks to the TikTokers and the Instagrammers who Instagram the Cotswolds to death, for example. We don't actually talk to them because if you look at the communication channels to date, there's no engagement there with that audience. We could actually teach and request and build a relationship with these people of how we want to sustainability build back. And I've written other notes around impacts on environment and green tourism. Sustainability is everywhere at the moment in this strategy planning, and the effects a visitor has when they visit. The first problem we have is you can go into a forest here and you get completely cut off your mobile phone. You've never been here before, and your first experience is, where the hell am I going from A to B? I don't have any mobile signal or Wi-Fi. So we've really got to think about generationally to attract a younger demographic particularly. They want to be on Insta when they're here, photographing in beautiful doorways. They can't do it because they can't get online. We've also started to home in on ground level up. There's a lot of focus around economic development, and it's always local authority when it comes to economic development. And that doesn't actually take into consideration what it's like to work on the ground, to have a business that's closed right now, or, you know, if you've never served in a hospitality environment, how do you know what it's going to be like to come back? Customer expectation. If your focus is on economic development, we've got to just reopen the doors first and hope to God visitors do come back. The landscape of the globe and how different markets will open over a period of time will impact our inbound tourism, but also the UK's responsibility on what tourism is going out is also really important for other countries' recovery. So it's not just about working locally together collaboratively and in partnership, but it's also about nationally and internationally. I love the remit of this Business Insights, and I've really enjoyed since it's been the invention of it, because we've created a collective global community where we really can start to focus on what impacts you in Washington right now in our media. Is I don't think people are going to want to visit, but it can be in our interests to really speak to the ground level and say what's actually going on and what can we tell people in this area and encourage them, because you're on the ground and your businesses are affected equally. I will finish up very quick, but I've got 2 A4 pages after today's great meeting. Evolving over time, the high street visitor economy, we were just talking about that briefly before, peaked in the 90s, generational again. I really think we need to take seriously what the high street purpose is. I don't really want to see people impacting the high street negatively where there's no spend, there's no real purpose. I think we're all getting used to and forced to being used to shop online. We've got to get down with that kind of new analogy and essential shopping and control waste, green tourism. I don't want to see bottles being thrown because somebody went to the high street and bought it, and if I haven't got a bin, where am I putting it? Oh, in that bush. But if you don't think essential shopping is just browsing around the high street anymore, it doesn't serve a purpose to the businesses. Window shopping doesn't make them any money really. Let's not build back to that. We've fast-tracked the inevitable, in my opinion, through COVID on the high street. Yeah, and from a tourism perspective, not politically driven, listening to the businesses, and from a community outreach perspective, the younger demographic, what do they truly want from an experience? Jersey is another of my markets out in the Channel Islands, and the shared memories market is huge out there, really instilling in our children great memories. Nadine started this at the beginning about having great childhood memories about the places you're visiting. Will want you to take your children there in the future, and so you create this circular tourism effect for the future. And I think that it starts with the kids, and I'm hoping it ends with the kids, and when we're all gone, there'll be generational ancestors with kids all going around in circles. That's probably where I'll end. I feel like I've told a story.
Thank you, Steve. I love that. I love that. It's so funny. I have a tradition in my family that every the winter holidays, every winter for my adult life, since I had children, we go to some exotic place. And of all the memories we've ever created, that's what lasts. So I think, it's sort of like we've just failed to underestimate the importance of place. We failed to underestimate the inertia of our organizational life. We've got to break out of it. And I think, conversations like this, I hope are inspiring I hope they inspire others to be willing to do that. It's risky behavior, but what the hell? We only live once. Pete, any closing comments from your end? You're on mute. Go ahead.
Sorry, classic one. Keeping my side of it quite brief. I mean, I take away there are challenges, and I think empowering the local community. Now, whether I mean by that local authorities or people down to street level, up to town level, city level, regionally, but empowering local communities to take ownership of their spaces is a challenge, and it's not an easy challenge, but it's a challenge. There's been a lot of talk about young people, and I completely agree. And there's something which I've come to realize, just having a number of these conversations, that there's this trade-off, isn't there, between young people's innovative, native, digital natives and those sorts of words versus life experience and people who've lived a few decades or whatever and have been there and got the t-shirt and understood why some things are wrong. And neither one of those is right or wrong. There is a balance needed, but the problem I think society faces is that, of course, the decision takers are inevitably the guys at the older end, the guys and gals, sorry, at the older end of that, and they're trying to take decisions on behalf of young people through the lens that they're looking through, and that's a difficult one to reconcile. So there's another challenge. And the third challenge, which I think that I've got down under challenge, is mental health, and actually taking that seriously. Now there's a phrase, realistic positivity. I think to go to saying keeping things positive and bright and cheerful is fine, but you get into the other realm of mindless optimism then, versus the need to actually keep a positive place. So realistic positivity as a society, and understanding how mental health works, which I don't think many of us do in any particular shape or form, and outside of the professionals. I think there are a couple of whats. What place is social media and the media playing in the fast-paced digital communication environment, where a very good friend of mine who's a television producer said, the problem that's grown and has always been there really with certainly television media is jeopardy. People, any television producer is looking for the jeopardy. That's the thing that creates the hang. And if you look at the news, good news is great, and it can be so boring. They had a great time today and created a great law, and it was all wonderful, lovely, great. Well, actually, that's what we need as society, but it doesn't create the jeopardy, and of course that's what creates the eyeball count and which we're all familiar with. So media in general, social media in specific, how does that play into all this? And then finally, I'd say there's a how in here, and I think we touched this afternoon a little bit on creativity, and many of these things are born out of creativity. And in culture, we have the arts born out of creativity. Mental health, how do we deal with creativity? Creativity is a great solution, a great way forward when it comes to mental health. And in business, creativity leads to innovation. We have the same STEM subjects, and there's a saying, isn't there? If you add art to STEM, you end up with STEAM, head of STEAM. So, you know, innovation. How is innovation born? It needs creativity in there. So those are my takeaways, I think, from today.
Great. Well, thank you. I hate this idea that good news is boring, and I am determined for this group and like-minded people to say, well, you know, what is the exciting thing to do? And it could be good, and it could be, you know, useful, and there's got to be transformative change. I'm certain that the way we've always done things is not necessarily the best tact. And people say, well, when are we going back to normal? And I'm saying, I didn't like the old normal. I don't want the new normal. So I think we have our work cut out for us. Just one final thought, which is that we started the session, which some of the listeners haven't seen, but it started with questioning. I think you can create your own difficult questions within your work, within your life, and just try this out. Do this questioning rather than just coming up with answers. I think for me, it's always informative and thought-provoking, and I certainly learned from you today. I think this kind of solution storming, sort of quick session, you know, insights and ideas and things that are actually being done, I think it's really the way to engage, the way to make us all feel like we've all got good ideas. For God's sake, we're all smart. So I encouraged each of you to do more of this. And Pete, if I can ask, if everyone on this call is willing, we can exchange emails and sort of make sure that we stay in touch. If you have questions or problems or other questions, we can reconnect again.
We can certainly do that if everybody's happy.
Great. If anybody objects, just let us know.
If anybody objects, drop me an email and say I'd rather not. But otherwise, I will take a default that you're happy.
Are there any final burning thoughts? Anybody got some crazy idea they want to just throw out? Anything?
I just want to mention one thing, because I think one of the things I'm interested now in is how the economic system is transitioning. And for a long time, the revenues of local councils were based on taxes and revenues from physical assets, like retail, offices, housing, and property tax and land tax. But as we shift in the economy, I think we will have to rethink the revenue structure of how this goes, and sharing economy and some of the economic concepts around green economy and circular economy might really help us in that sense. And so we rethink also the real estate as a sector. Placemaking and the real estate sector have always had some tensions, and these tensions needs to be acknowledged if we can have future policies for a inclusive.
Thank you. Pete just asked me, Janina, did you have a chance to give your insights?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. It's been so fascinating.
Please carry on.
It's been so fascinating listening to everyone's views, and just from my own experiences, I think also there's a need to upskill decision makers on technology, because there is a tendency that certain communication is always done either through Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. But if you're trying to reach a younger audience, then you do need to have an understanding of TikTok, for example. And perhaps it's not that person that delivers the strategy, but if they have no trust basically in the strategy because they have a lack of understanding, they're not going to approve a strategy that uses TikTok. And I was also just reflecting on everyone's thoughts. I was also thinking, you know, young people may have not experienced a place changing before, so they might not have the hope that actually things will change, so they might move. And sometimes I actually think it's important to have something changing in the physical space, either that things are moving along, because they might not read a local strategy, and actually making things like lighter or having just perhaps from my point of view, some graphics or initiatives going on help demonstrate that things are changing, rather than seeing building sites. And perhaps mock-ups are really good as well. But that's just my perspective on things. How is this communicated? Also, is it communicated on radio? Who makes the decision of who enters the conversation? Because we're likely to be attracted to people who think like us, so we might not actually have the connections. So like in Gloucestershire, they're fantastic community builders that are connected to really passionate volunteers. So bringing them to the conversation is really important as well.
Yeah, great. Really, really important insight. Thank you, Janina. Any other final closing comments? I guess we're going to wrap up.
I think about mentors as well. Just talking about what you're saying there with young people, having mentors, to oversee them is so important as well. Like within organisations going forward. But just on another note, because we're in a seaside town in Weston, yeah, and as you all know, it's freezing cold over here at the minute. On the seafront yesterday and seen all our local swimmers go out swimming in the sea at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they all came out, and basically every day they do it, and they say they feel 100% better when they come out of the water, and they feel refreshed and ready for the day. So a thought is that get out there in the freezing water, and we'll all feel much better when we get up in the morning and go to work.
Oh, wow. You mean they do this every day?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I'm impressed. It's one of those assets that Weston should probably promote. My final thought is, once you identify, your community identity, its strengths, and its the reasons the quality of life there is so valuable, communicate the hell out of it. So I think we really need to do that in forms, even TikTok and Instagram, way beyond the normal communications channels. So we've got our work cut out for us. Without any further ado, I want to thank each of you again for joining us. This was a pleasure for me, and I really learned a lot. I hope we all did. And let's stay in touch.